Welcome to the Hawkeye Sidekick podcast. And you're very welcome back to the Hawkeye Sidekick Rugby Union podcast with your host Mark Kennedy, joined again this week by Liam O'Brien. Liam, how are things?
Good, Mark. Good. It was an exciting weekend, except it wasn't too worked out well for Munster, I'd say.
We'll have a run the rule of the Durban match last weekend, where Munster were hit for 50 points by the Sharks. Leinster Rugby advancing to a quarter-final against the Leicester Tigers with a 30-15 win over Ulster Rugby at the Aviva. Connacht Rugby's Challenge Cup journey finished fairly emphatically by a dominant Benetton Rugby outfit, 41-19 in Italy. We'll also have a look at some of the other marquee games from last 16 from the Champions Cup and Challenge Cup perspective, and also have a look at the quarterfinals scheduled for the Champions Cup and Challenge Cup this weekend. And if that's not all, we'll also have a look at the Tik Tok Six Nations Women's Tournament and run the rule over the first two rounds there. I suppose, Liam, let's start from the start. Saturday, lunchtime kickoff in Durban. Again, 28 degrees, 80% humidity. Munster found the Sharks too hot to handle.
Yeah, except in all fairness, in the first half at least, we were in the game. And we scored some nice tries. And yeah, I suppose it's just very hard to figure out how it went wrong, how so badly wrong in that second half. There were some good performances, actually. I thought Hodnett actually stood up in that game. I thought Daly and certainly Calvin Nash, some nice little breaks there from Fekitoa, and offensively with Frisch. Certainly Crowley, I think, has to be worth another look again. He's a guy who certainly had his kick boots on. He nice pass through the ball. But it's more up front, 7 out of 8 there, where we were kind of taken to the cleaners, really.
I think this is a true acid test. And I suppose Munster see the levels that they need to go to really compete with the elite. We've seen it season in, season out now, Liam, in recent seasons where we've optimistically got to a quarter-final or a semi-final of the Champions Cup only to be really felled by a team with a superior pack, superior game plan or superior backline cohesion. And I suppose Sharks did really expose and really played to their strengths here to a certain extent, but maybe we'll go to the third quarter massacre in a while. But I suppose we get to the opening period here, Liam. Nice start from Munster after an early Sharks penalty concession. Shane Daly going over, great try really, and attacking movement from Munster, and a great finish from Shane Daly to get an early lead for Munster.
It was, and again, it's something that even in the bad defeats against Glasgow and this one, our backline has clicked at times. There's no doubt about it. And again, Crowley was very prominent in getting Fekitoa into the game, and he got Daly away. And again, Daly had a bit of work to do had to really step in well to take it under the posts. Very well worked try. First try of the game. It was after that, it's when the Sharks came back. Personally, I thought for the Pimpy, it's a bit harsh. I think he kind of sidestepped John Klein, fair enough. But I think there was one or two other Munster backs that were sidestepped. I know that Donegal Callan was praising the world-class finish, and I suppose you can look at it that way as well, I guess.
Look, the conditions are one thing, but I suppose it's the physicality. I mean, rugby you're playing, it's a simple game. If you win your collisions, I felt the Sharks, even in that early first quarter, were really testing Munster out from a physicality perspective. Also, the breakdown work was absolutely exquisite, I thought, from the Sharks. They really honed in on that in terms of their first and second wave breakdown attacks here. Munster really, and this is repeated again from Munster Rugby, and this is a new management team, I know. But again, this whole adaptation during a game, it felt that Munster at no point here really did adapt their style or look to address the issues, really, particularly in the breakdown, because if you're really conceding the breakdown here, Liam, a team like the Sharks with such an explosive back three, also the pack as well, it will be a long afternoon. And so it kind of proved eventually. But I suppose the Hendricks try in 15 minutes, again, as you say, Mabimpi, literally great sidestep. There was a few kind of other tackles, whereas kind of the support for Klein on that. But Hendricks goes over with a fine score and gives the hosts momentum that they really kind of did build upon.
Yeah, they did, I guess. I suppose, look, It's a bit then had quite a powerful pick and go and drive over a line that facing Sliman 17-7, but it was still all up in the air. The result was still in the balance, and look, Dave Kilcoyne was able to drive over to bring us right back into the game really at that stage.
Absolutely. Superb cameo from Calvin Nash as well leading up to that. Made a linebacker out of absolutely nothing here, evaded several would-be tackles from the Sharks, leading to that score. Thought the pack phase play was pretty decent, and Kilcoyne going over from short range. So, I mean, given how the game went, there was a little bit of control, accuracy issues from Munster. The breakdown had become an issue. Going into the Sheds 17-14 down, I felt relatively confident that management and players would certainly address some of the issues. But my God, Liam, third quarter wise, what you can't be giving this Sharks outfit is easy access into your 22, and particularly from 5 to 10 metres out, because their front five will destroy you. And I mean, the 3 penalties straight after each other, really allowing the line-out drive to be set up for the Sharks for devastating effect.
And for Mbenambi two tries from Mauls, but particularly his second one, it was like literally unopposed. It was like the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen in my life. And they just walked over, But at that stage, that was probably match probably over at that stage, and certainly was when Werner Koch picked up a ball and ran, and that was the end of that. But I think, look, all game, as you said, at the breakdown, it was like just mayhem. I think that we were looking for ball too quickly, so we got to the breakdown way ahead of schedule, and then they were to just blow us apart. Like, we just didn't kind of set up ourselves up for the counter look. The amount of penalties they got, I suppose, look, we were destroyed eventually in terms of the scrum. Really, it's hard to know whether they took the foot off the gas in the last 20 minutes or we finally kind of got to terms with the conditions.
I think a bit of both, really, to be honest with you, Liam. I think given that devastating third quarter period here where, 3 tries in quick minutes here, the game, the tie is over. I mean, the body language I thought from Munster, particularly after that third try, I was alarming. I thought a few players' heads went down. I think organisation, also composure went out the window a little bit here as well, Liam, which I think from a management perspective will be a massively disappointing aspect to the performance. Just in those vital minutes, really, after that third try, to really see if we could hold it together for 5-10 minutes, but it never really materialised. And then an awful lot of indiscipline in terms of our attacking play as well. I know we had to go for broke as well here, and no better team than the Sharks to really anticipate and prey on those errors. I thought it was just overall just particularly for the first 60 minutes, it was kind of a harsh lesson for Munster here in terms of cup rugby, particularly against a very dominant opponent who had their homework done on Munster, that, you have to get things so right on these playoff fixtures. And again, Munster a bit short, and again, tries followed in regular patterns. And I mean, I think that Bosch try as well, the image of, you see 5 or 6 Munster players languishing behind Bosch as he basically dives theatrically over in the corner. For me, that was the image. Munster players looked absolutely spent on their feet, exhausted. And this is after 57 minutes. So I'm just wondering here, in terms of climatization, in terms of conditioning, in terms of preparation for this game, it just feels that a few things were a little bit short here for Munster going into this, and it came back to bite them.
From what I heard as well, from the supporters that were there, most supporters, they thought it was actually brutal weather conditions. And then we heard that Munster came in late into Durban for the game. Again, as you said, no real acclimatization whatsoever. I mean, what's that about? Sleeping in extra nights hotel, you know what I mean? It's like, it's just hard to understand what's going on. But yeah, look, I mean, I thought the last 3 tries anyway of the Sharks, like there was to be various bounce of a ball, intercept, pass. I mean, it was kind of, on our days maybe they might have worked, but also you'd have to say that Munster were just very sloppy as well in everything we did in the game, in being accurate in any portion of the game.
Yeah, I think even early doors here. I know there was a clip that was highlighted by Murray Kinsella in terms of Craig Casey at bottom of a ruck, and essentially was looking for Fekitoa to be the first receiver. Ball basically not where Fekitoa wants it, basically defers it back to Frisch, and again we're basically on back foot ball here. So I mean, stuff like that really. Our kicking game was, I thought, a little bit disappointing as well, and I think Sharks did prey on the conditions here as well. Here, Liam, particularly in that first half where Munster's back three had to basically contend with the sun. So again, an awful lot of factors here. Yeah, the acclimatization here. Look, the thing here, Liam, Durban, there was no altitude here. I mean, I'd say, in terms of maybe going to the Cape or maybe into the Transvaal. But the fact of the matter is the climatization factor here, I think, was probably a key one here in terms of the heat. Definitely, it looked as if Munster players really kind of struggled. They struggled from about minute 25, 30 on here. They were basically rolling off tackles. And again, it's that challenge of going to South Africa, particularly when you get to Challenger Champions Cup here. You need to get your preparation. You need to get everything right in terms of your synchronization. And yeah, unfortunately, Munster were found a little bit wanting on the day. But again, give them credit where credit is due. I know the subs bench were cleared at this stage, but again, an encouraging finish here. This could have been an awful scoreline come the final whistle. But the fact that they reduced the arrears to 15 points at the end with some lovely tries really does show, that there is capability there. But again, it's the whole 80-minute performance here. And again, the accuracy was a little bit lacking.
Even in bad defeats, who scored four or five tries in the last two games as well, so we will keep scoring tries like that. But it's obviously the defensive side is just shocking, in the last three games, the amount of tries and points that we've conceded. And again, it's very hard to know how has it collapsed so much in two games. What's also Dennis Leamy thinking, what's going on there as well. Yeah, then you also have the thing of, we can't get away from the fact that we have arguably, our Munster front row of Cronin, who's playing abroad now, and John Ryan playing abroad. And then, of course, we have Jeremy Loughman injured. So effectively, look, we have no scrum of any note. So to go against any team of quality, we're going to get absolutely mauled at scrum time as well.
Well, particularly when it's the Sharks and you look at the South African contingent that's in that front five particularly and in that pack. I think this was, I had mentioned on my Facebook page that an awful lot of things would have to have gone a hell of a lot right for Munster. Again, that scrum was literally creaking early. Salanoa goes off early. Stephen Archer comes on after 18 minutes. Kilcoyne manfully came in, did try to do a job. Same with Scannell, but again, it's the brute force of that Sharks front five, and I think this is the lesson here for Munster when it comes to the business end of the season. Really, packs win championships. You can have all the attacking fair play that you want, but the fact is you need a solid base. You need a solid front five and your pack to be dominant in terms of the collisions. If that's not happening, you're out for early elimination or out for disappointment. And we've seen this team in the last decade in terms of Munster here when they come up against the real elite teams here. And I would rate Sharks pack as an elite unit here. So it's no disgrace to getting beat by them. But again, it's where are the reinforcements? What's the improvement going to be here for Munster next season? I know John Ryan will be coming back after his stint by Waikato Chiefs. But again, there needs to be a hell of a lot more enforcement in that pack, particularly front five, particularly when you get to the business end. I know Ty Burns out with injury, but again, it's that front row. Build the platform in terms of a good scrum and also your line out as well. And I think it creaked at various points here at the weekend again, and don't know where Munster go from here, really, to be fair, with the recruitment that's been non-existent in that unit.
Yeah, and it looks as if recruitment is done, as in the squad is there for next season, apart, as you said, from John Ryan. There's nothing else going to be happening, certainly for the beginning of next season, unless we do some medical joke or something during next season. But that's pretty much it. That's pretty much the squad. And if they're not good enough now, they're hardly going to be good enough to win and to major next season. But there's always things that can be done in terms of just be more competitive and at the breakdown, and just, I suppose, defensively not being so passive. That's another thing. I thought we were very passive defensively as well.
Yeah, like, I mean, there was a good quote there from Russ Petty on Twitter. 130 points leaked by Munster in the last 3 games. You can bring it back to Musgrave Park, particularly in that second half performance against Scarlet. Scarlet sensed an awful lot of soft ruck area defence, an awful lot of passive line speed. That has continued. And I thought for the Glasgow Warriors game, for the first time this season, I felt Glasgow bullied Munster. They bullied Munster in all aspects of play, in terms of the breakdown, in terms of front five. Thought there was an incident when Gavin Coombs tried to go over early against Glasgow. He was held up. And again, there was a bit of kind of sledging went on from Glasgow. Not one Munster player reacted and basically supported Coombs. I thought that was alarm bells going into a game of the Sharks' magnitude. I don't know what's happened here in Munster, but definitely the line speed, the organisation, it's not in the same level as it was maybe at the start of the year. Or maybe have teams figured Munster out and the schemes that Dennis Leamy has been setting up here. Because it's certainly their line breaks here have been plentiful. And again, the cover defence, hasn't been quick to react. So I think there's an awful lot of worry here for Dennis Leamy, but I think collectively for a team, I think for Mike Prendergast and also for Graham Rowntree here, how did they stem the tide here? I mean, it doesn't get any easier here, Liam, for Munster. I know they'll have the bye week this week. Unfortunately, they're not in quarterfinal action, but they then travel down to South Africa to face the Stormers and face the Sharks again. And I mean, these two teams need results as well, so it doesn't get any easier for Munster Rugby, and that top 7 URC playoff place is hanging by a thread.
Yeah, and we need, I suppose, at least need a point to probably get 7th spot. I don't think we can probably get it through losing bonus points. I think it's more a case of us scoring 4 try points. That's probably the way to get it realistically, because those two teams are going to be gunning for the Sharks for keeping in the top 8, and for the Stormers to get a home draw. So it's not going to get any easier, as you said.
I suppose the only saving grace maybe is potentially if games were to go the way of the Stormers and also the Sharks, maybe they're having one eye on a semi-final in the Champions Cup and maybe put out squads that are a little bit weakened. But again, that's only a hope here, Liam. I mean, given where the Sharks are in terms of their URC playoff aspirations, I can see them going all out now for the rest of the season to really secure a berth. And as well as that, the Stormers need at least another win here. And sure, Munster coming to the Cape in another few weeks. I don't see any let up here for Munster. It's Munster now that really have to focus on a performance and really tighten up defensively, and it's not going to get any easier. The weather conditions are probably going to get a little bit tougher, if anything else here, Liam. Particularly with the Stormers, I know we'll probably move away here from Munster and the Sharks, but I mean, the Stormers showed against the Harlequins like what an exceptional side they are with ball in hand, and I mean, given what Munster's defensive woes have been in recent weeks, that's not the team that you want to be facing here to restore any sort of defensive confidence.
It was in terms of this weekend, it was one of the most comprehensive wins that they had against Harlequins, and 2 tries at the end really glossed it completely for Quins. But yeah, they are. I mean, to be honest, they're probably up there with anyone as favourites for the European Cup. Absolutely, they're a real unbelievably quality side.
Oh, class act, absolute class act here, Liam. Having a very abrasive pack, very exciting halfback partnership as well, and looking explosive pack line here that you give him an inch, he'll go a mile. And I think Harlequins kind of seen that to the full effect. And I think it kind of emphasises well to me, Liam, in terms of Challenge Cup and Champions Cup, how difficult it will be for teams, and what has been for teams to get results in South Africa. Even the Lions put 50 points past Racing 92 in a Challenge Cup last 16 game, which I thought was the standout performance of the Challenge Cup, really, to be fair. So I think, it doesn't get any easier here. And I think from a Munster perspective, I think an awful lot of soul searching maybe in terms of, I know the project is early in terms of this new management setup. They'll continue to embrace the new attacking ethos, but there has to be a root and branch review in terms of how they're preparing for these marquee games. And also, I suppose, squad additions here, even if they have to look internally within provincial AIL ranks here to see if there's prospects to basically bolster squad depth here, because it is getting to the point here now that Munster are really looking over the shoulder here, and heaven forbid if they don't get into a top 7 spot, Challenge Cup next season, that'll be a massive blow for Munster Rugby.
Yeah, and apparently, this is Jerry Thornley. Munster have nothing financially. Munster are in dire straits. Yep. So, yeah. So, I mean, the most obvious thing is we have to keep our Champions Cup place, or then we go down rapidly. You know, like to be fair, like some of those French sides who never really recovered, having been at the top of European rugby, still find it difficult to understand how we can't get there will be good props in places like Georgia and Italy that would certainly lock a scrum. That's the very simple thing that can be done. And actually now, with the whole chaos really in terms of English rugby and the salary cap, there are a lot of players available, and not for crazy money either. We're not talking about, you know, 500,000, 400,000 a year, you know, probably over the quarter of a million if we could afford that. So, yeah, there certainly are options, I think, there.
I think there's certainly options, Liam, but again, it's all down to the IRFU directive, isn't it? One Peter Nusifora, who really is responsible for player personnel issues within the IRFU. So, again, there may be a case stated by Graham Rowntree and management here in terms of depth chart, particularly front 5, I would say, even front row, as a kind of a matter of urgency here, where they can go, because again, there would be options, certainly, and who knows in terms of Gallagher Premiership, in terms of finding more financial meltdown here, in terms of clubs maybe having to shed players to balance the books. So I think that'll be an interesting watch, but even from a Challenge Cup perspective, I shudder to think from a Munster Rugby perspective, the dip in revenue streams, sponsorship, I would even say non-playing staff here, Liam, if we get to the situation where Challenge Cup, I think this is where people don't understand here that Munster Rugby squad, particularly IRFU contracted players, may be asked to move to other provinces who are in Champions Cup. So I think there's an awful lot of layered implications here, and I think it's imperative for Munster to get at least 3 to 4 points here come the end of the season to ensure that they're in that top 7, because otherwise, yeah, given I think the financial predicament of an awful lot of rugby clubs, and Munster included, Champions Cup is where the revenue streams are. I think it's going to be very hard for Munster to really rebuild and build a project if they're in a Challenge Cup situation next season.
Yeah, but it's the whole Munster project really. I mean, you'd have to say that this professional rugby board questions have to be asked as well at executive level. How, you know, disastrous signings being made in terms of foreign players, letting go some of our top players. A few extra thousand, quite frankly, would have kept the likes of a John Ryan. Then we have, you know, the white elephant, which is Thomond Park, which simply isn't used outside of 3 or 4 match days, really, you know. I suppose the dissatisfaction that is there now in Cork, I suppose just in terms of the training bases alone, you know, that really hasn't worked out, if anything. Since Munster have came to Limerick to the high performance unit, there's been a dip in performances. So these things have to be looked at as well, I think.
I agree with you, and there's more infrastructural work going on in terms of academy bases being set up in Limerick and Cork. That's fair enough. But again, it's the root and branch review that was required last season. I don't think things have been fully implemented here. I think from a team perspective, how will they get over and compete with the elite squads? I mean, look at the record in the URC this season, Liam. You know, it's 9 wins, 7 losses here. And I mean, some of the losses here, you know, again, the Cardiff Rugby Dragons, but quite a few of them have been against teams that are the elite teams. I would consider the top 4 being the elite teams here in the URC. So, I mean, from that perspective here, Liam, I think it's worrying times, I would think, for Munster Rugby and the supporters, really. And a bit of a nervy end of season to it, because I mean the 10 situation here, Liam, as well. I mean, we go to other fixtures in a while, but I mean Joey Carberry had been the number 10 up until last weekend, and then was basically dropped. So I mean, from a player perspective here, if you're Joey Carberry, you know, with Ben Healy out the door to Edinburgh, there may be a chance here that Joey Carberry really reviews considers his options in the summer and maybe looks to maybe depart early from Munster Rugby. So then you're kind of left in a bit of a bind here if Jack Crowley is your sole number 10 here. So I think there's personnel issues that probably to be sorted out here, particularly in the off season here, Liam.
I think that is going to be Carberry's last season anyway in terms of under contract with Munster. But absolutely, it's kind of a big snub to him, I guess. Crowley, who all season didn't really start at number 10, to be given it in the most crucial game of the season. But again, in the next 2 weeks, we have big decisions to make in terms of selections. I mean, I suppose that panic selection for Sneeman to give him that sort of a full first start, ever for Munster. That certainly is questionable. I think we need to have maybe a bit more on the bench, the likes of maybe Healy, maybe Earls, Zebo, those sorts of options coming off at least on the next South African tour.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's all hands to the pump here, Liam. I think there's no excuses now. Full squad. These guys need to be on a plane and need to be prominent in terms of some of those games here. I think experience is going to be required, particularly. So I think Zebo, even Keith Earls for that extent, would take an awful lot of boxes for me. Again, Antoine Fisher, 13, I didn't feel he was fully 100% fit, to be perfectly fair. And again, in a heavy pitch, like in the Sharks, did kind of expose him for missed tackles during the 80 minutes. So again, I think the Schneiman move, I think, was more what they saw, what was in front of them from a Munster management perspective. I think it was done just purely to a psychological edge, really. But Snyman had precious game minutes going in here, particularly against Scarlets and also Glasgow Warriors. So then to expect him to elevate his performance against an elite pack, Sharks, I thought was asking a little bit too much. And to be fair to Finian Wycherley, he actually acquitted himself pretty well when he came in. So, again, I think 9 and 10 here. Look, I can see the mantra from Munster Rugby. They want to keep this fast, up-tempo, quick ball from ruck. That's fair enough. But I think the breakdown work was a little bit awry here and really did cause more problems for Munster Rugby. So, look, I think it's all for Munster to really sit down, reflect and go forward. That's the only thing they can do here and really kind of play with a little bit more game smarts, particularly defensively. But that's not going to be easy, given the Sharks and the Stormers coming up. Suppose name Leinster, Ulster. Again, wet afternoon and evening in the Aviva. Ulster tried hard here, but Leinster, I felt, were pretty much in control for good portions at the game. 30-15 result.
Yeah, certainly was. But again, at least Ulster were in the game. They were always there, right through to the end. I mean, pretty much it was only maybe the last 15 minutes that they had that comfortable 15-point lead. Yeah, I thought that Ulster started okay. They got the Duet penalty, and then, to be fair, Brian Baird had an absolutely massive carry to score his try. He was immense all afternoon. And what impressed me about Leinster was, I suppose, the fact that the likes of Baird and Ryan, the physicality that they bring, they have that dog in them now, as well as on the dry day they can obviously spread the ball, but on the wet day they can keep it in the pack. I mean, Conan was incredible. We talk about Gavin Coombs, but to be fair, Conan the last few games has just been off the charts in terms of he's carrying his rucking for Leinster as well. And yeah, so I mean, look, that first half, I think the Hume try was a real beauty. That cross kick from Billy Burns, and yeah, I mean, as I said, there were always thereabouts when Jamison Gibson Park got over for his try. Rob Herring came back and mauled over. So yeah, I think they can be proud of their effort. Genuinely, I think they can. Ulster, I just think that Leinster were always going to have that extra, 10-point sort of differential.
Yeah, to be fair to Ulster, effort-wise, work rate, you can't fault it. In terms of the territory, the possession, it was all Leinster, really, to be fair. 62% possession, 74% for Leinster as well. So, again, for Ulster, they were living a bit on scraps, let's be brutally honest. To be fair to them, 197 tackles in the full 80 minutes. That's massive commitment from Ulster. And when they did get opportunities here, Liam, they certainly did impress. I thought that Stockdale Burns kicks, very impressive for the James Hume try. And also Rob Herring's statistics were off the chart in terms of, I think, 21 tackles. But again, found that attacking maul to kind of give a glimmer of hope here. But I suppose Leinster have kind of shown here it was a wet day in the Aviva. I thought the kicking game for Leinster was far superior than Ulster, and particularly from a back three perspective, that was kind of a key aspect for me on that. I mean, from a Leinster perspective, 1,025 metres gained from kicks versus 610 from Ulster Rugby. I think from an Ulster Rugby perspective, the discipline as well cost them dear as well, didn't it? With Hume getting sin binned, that then leading to Gibson Park's try straight under the post, and then Harry Sheridan as well. But again, the penalty count 15-7 to Ulster. I mean, again, for a quality team like Leinster, who only missed one tackle during the 80 minutes here, Liam, it's very difficult to beat them at the best of times. But when they're that accurate and when they're that kind of pack-orientated focused, they can beat you anyway. And I think from an Ulster perspective, they did as well as they could, I think, given the circumstances.
I suppose there have been other years where they probably should have won, Ulster, but I just think they played to the best of their ability, and I guess that's really all you can think about when you're playing those top four kind of elite teams in Europe. You bring your A game, and your A game still isn't quite enough. But they dug in, and I think that they certainly have something to build on for next season. I think that for Ulster, it's now a question of they can still get maybe a top four spots and still get to the final in the URC. That has to be their aim, really.
I think so, and I think that's a genuine aspiration here, Liam. Great to see Jacob Stockdale back as well, wasn't it? In terms of ball in hand play, I thought it was very impressive. Again, it's a good outfit here, Liam. So I think the pack can be relatively satisfied as well. Like Rory Sunderland, Rob Herring, and Tom O'Toole here acquitted themselves well. Again, I think it was fine margins here to a certain extent, but I thought just Leinster, as soon as Rob Herring scores their try, they just go down the other end of the pitch. 5 minutes later, Jimmy O'Brien held up just short, and then Andrew Porter crashes over. I mean, game over. It just showed the clinical nature of Leinster, and I suppose this is something that Ulster Rugby, if there's a lesson learned here, is how really close out games of this magnitude. They did have kind of periods where got more points on the board, yes, but I mean, Leinster were just purely clinical in what they did in very difficult conditions, and to be fair, they're very well set up, I think, Liam, for this last day tie against Leicester Tigers on Good Friday.
Yes, certainly are. I mean, I think they're saying that possibly Van der Fleer might be missing that. But yeah, I mean, look, you'd have to fancy Leinster to do that after, last year I think they actually had to travel to Leicester Tigers and they still had a comprehensive victory. But yeah, it's looking like Leinster are definitely kind of peaking at the right time in the season, and they have that crucial semi-final and potentially final in the Aviva. So I mean, it's all to play for them. But again, for me, they have a physicality that the other Irish teams don't have. Leinster, and they really have that sort of tiger bullishness at the breakdown, and they had the physicality almost of the top South African and French sides. That's kind of what impresses me the most this season.
I alluded to it in the Munster piece here about lessons learned. Packs do win championships here. And, I look at this front five now for Leinster, and it is very potent, isn't it? I mean, you look at Andrew Porter, Cian Healy from a loose head. You have Dan Sheehan, now Ronan Kelleher wasn't available. You have John McKee in as a substitute, Tyke Furlong, Michael Alatoa. Ross Maloney, who thought didn't put a foot wrong on the day, impressed. James Ryan, who's having a wonderful season. And then you have the likes of Jenkins to come in here to close out these games. I mean, Van der Fleer, as you said, injured, rolls the ankle. But sure, look, you've Scott Penny coming in on 54 minutes, who is an absolute gem of a player. We rate him so highly here on this podcast. And the likes of Jack Conan really impressing at the right time of the year. Ryan Baird as well, the versatility, he can go in at second row. So I mean, look, you've an awful lot of physicality, you've an awful lot of skill set there here, Liam. And for Leicester Tigers here, I think it looks like it's going to be a dry track day in the Aviva on Good Friday. It could be a long evening for Leicester Tigers if Leinster really do click here.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a long day. I think it's going to be maybe a more comfortable victory for Leinster than people are anticipating. I think for Leicester, I mean, you're also looking at them. They're playing. They're going to be playing on a bigger pitch that Leinster are used to, and Leicester not quite. So, but Leicester have the smarts. One thing I would say, they have the rugby smarts. They will try and come with a tactic to really, I suppose, disrupt Leinster. That's what every team is trying to do, but it's yet to be seen who will actually come up with that perfect plan.
I think the perfect plan, nobody really has hatched it yet in URC. Maybe Stormers to a certain degree in the RDS, but again, you couldn't really evaluate the Leinster side that was out, and they even got a draw against the Stormers, that Leinster selection. So I think the work's cut out for Leicester Tigers. That 16-6 win against Edinburgh. Now again, it was played under pretty atrocious conditions in Welford Road. I think the crowd, the lack of attendance here really did dilute the atmosphere here, and to be fair to Leicester, they need a little bit more than what they provided against Edinburgh, who probably have a few regrets going after that game. I think particularly their halfbacks didn't really kind of fire their back line, and also there was a few penalties missed by Edinburgh that could have kept this game very close. So I think Leicester Tigers have an awful lot to work on this week. Everything has to go a hell of a lot right for them to really compete first off against Leinster, and we'll see how that goes. I suppose, Liam, we'll kind of leave that. I mean, any other standout ties in the Champions Cup last weekend you want to talk about?
No, just I certainly saw the Stormers against Quins, and that was hugely impressive, I have to say. But yeah, you'd have to say too, I guess, that Exeter, their win on the try callback, was it? How many more tries scored in the game was a bit farcical, and that's certainly stood out for me, I think.
Yeah, there was that red card to Zach Mercer as well, wasn't there, as well, that has garnered a bit of social media opinion there. I thought Montpellier must have thought that they had this in the bag with only 6 minutes left, but all credit to Exeter Chiefs, writing a new chapter in their European history. Again, it doesn't come much tougher though than the Stormers next weekend. So I think for me as well, maybe the La Rochelle Gloucester game, just with 8 minutes to go, it looked as if La Rochelle were on their way out, crashing out of the tournament, down to 14 players, but I suppose Teddy Thomas bailing La Rochelle out here. Maybe it's just a little bit of reality check for Ronan O'Gara's charges here. Gloucester did come to play. Maybe there was a little bit of disrespect here from La Rochelle, but take nothing away from Gloucester. Thought they played their part massively in this fixture, but again, might give a little bit of hope for Saracens travelling to the west of France to face La Rochelle next weekend. I suppose Challenge Cup Connacht came into the tie against Benetton on the back of a pretty emphatic win against Edinburgh Rugby in the sports ground. After 17 minutes, they were 12-0 up against Benetton, but the wheels firmly came off here, Liam, with an emphatic 41-19 win for the hosts. I suppose, what were your reflections on the game for Connacht?
Yeah, I just saw some of the highlights of the tries there, but look, it was an absolute walloping in the end. That was Connacht very much first string side, bar Finlay Beelum. So it's a bit of an up and down thing from playing Edinburgh and playing so brilliantly. I suppose you just hope that this up and down thing, that the next game for them anyway will be against Cardiff, that they come out fighting. Bring it back. I have said constantly that Benetton are a very good side. They are up there with any of the teams in the URC. Again, because I suppose they have literally the entire Italian side. Once they can actually feel them, they would be impressive. And look, Benetton have a glorious chance, I suppose. If it doesn't work out in terms of URC, they have a glorious chance of actually winning the competition. It's very open in terms of the Challenge Cup.
It's absolutely wide open, Liam, to be fair. You look at these fixtures, even the Champions Cup and Challenge Cup fixtures last weekend, out of 16 fixtures, 15 home wins. And I mean, Benetton are up against Cardiff Rugby, who had a magnificent win against Sale Sharks. But going back to Benetton here, I thought their back play, and you've highlighted it in numerous podcasts here with me, Liam, their back play was first rate. I mean, you look at Menochello, Nacho Brex, Padavani, Ryan Smith. I thought Watson and Omanga here destroyed Connacht here, particularly in the second and third quarter. literally Connacht had no answers here to this free-flowing rugby that Benetton, the front foot ball from Benetton as well, after going 12-0 down, it was just too hot to handle for Connacht here, unfortunately.
Look, it was all second half was let's put it this way, it was completely Benetton. The result was never in doubt. I mean, that's what's probably the most shocking thing really in last 16 fixture in Europe. So Connacht have some serious soul searching to do once more, it has to be said.
I think so too, Liam. Now, you can probably point back to their last Challenge Cup fixture in the pool stages against Newcastle Falcons in Kingston Park, where Newcastle, let's face it, were out of contention to qualify. This was a perfect opportunity for Connacht Rugby, who many had tipped around Christmas time as being one of the form sides to actually get to a final in the Challenge Cup. It'd be a marvellous achievement. But they went to Newcastle, went 21-0 down early, never recovered. And this allowed this whole away fixture to then unfold. So I think Connacht, we were under no illusions here when we saw Benetton Rugby play Munster a few weeks ago, that this would be a pretty tough fixture for Connacht Rugby, and so it proved. But this inconsistency here, where they can, on their day, really match it, like the Edinburgh game the week before. Caelan Blade was absolutely superb. He had the Edinburgh defence off guard. But I think Benetton Rugby did their homework on Connacht Rugby here, really around the blind side, particularly the running lines. I thought really did expose an awful lot of three-quarters cohesion issues here as well, Liam. And to a man, I thought Benetton Rugby's pack really dominated here. I mean, Oliver's yellow card, it's academic. I mean, the tie is well over. But I mean, just a very dominant performance from Benetton, and I mean, it sets them up magnificently well here for the Cardiff Rugby. And as you say yourself, look, Challenge Cup win here gets you into Champions Cup next season. So I mean, it's a glorious opportunity here for Benetton, and I think exciting times are ahead for this Italian club.
Absolutely, yeah, and look, in terms of there is some quality there. You still have the Lions, and you still have Glasgow as well, but I mean, they're probably on the stronger half of the draw. Again, it depends, I suppose, on what if they get home fixtures, but at home they can take anyone at this stage.
No, superb win for Benetton. I suppose for Connacht Rugby, look, they have to dust themselves down. They have 2 games of the regular season, massive games. First one coming at home to Cardiff Rugby, who are still in playoff contention themselves. That'll be an emotional night, given that could be potentially the last home game for Connacht Rugby, particularly regular season. So, I mean, like Kieran Marmion, guys like that, maybe kind of playing their last game with Connacht at home. So, I mean, it's imperative to get a win because they go to Scotstoun to play a very much informed Glasgow Warriors team who put 73 points past Dragons, probably in the other standout performance of the Challenge Cup last weekend. So, again, for Connacht, it's pressurised rugby now. The reward is nearly there in terms of securing one of those top 7 berths. And I think that would be a nice end to Andy Friend's tenure at Connacht Rugby and would ensure kind of solid foundations for Pete Wilkins as he takes over as the head coach next season.
It would be amazing, but let's just hope it's not at the expense of Munster. That's all I have to add here.
Oh, well, look, league table doesn't lie at the end of the year, Liam, so we'll just have to kind of see where the abacus falls, really. So, but to be fair, congratulations to Benetton Rugby, and I think they're well set. I suppose, Liam, kind of concluding here with the European competitions, quarterfinals, then on Good Friday we have Leinster, Leicester Tigers. On Saturday we have Toulouse against Sharks, mouth-watering game. Exeter Stormers, and then on Sunday La Rochelle facing Saracens in an absolute pack physicality platform game on Sunday. What are your tips there?
I think it's honestly hard to call any of those fixtures. Really is like bounce of a ball sort of a thing, or intercept try. I suppose for me, maybe the most obvious one to call would be Stormers to beat Exeter. I'd be fairly confident in that one. Any of the rest, honestly, yeah, you'd have to say probably to Leinster to get over the line against Leicester Tigers. La Rochelle Saracens, yeah, it's that's a funny one. Again, it's pretty, home advantage is so crucial at this stage. It wouldn't surprise me though if Saracens actually won that game, I have to say. But I would have to probably tip La Rochelle to stay in the competition. Yeah. Then Toulouse Sharks, what a prospect there. Because if there's any team capable of going to Toulouse and winning, it will be the Sharks, And you are kind of almost looking at a shadow. It's like a shadow kind of South African selection against a shadow French selection, really, where the crucial stars for France are playing for Toulouse and the crucial stars for South Africa are playing for the Sharks. Toulouse in what I would consider quite a high scoring game. I'd tip them by 5 points to get over the line there.
Yeah, I think that's the standout fixture here, Toulouse and Sharks, because it'll be interesting if Edwin Ethebet is fit. I know he went off at half time against Munster. The pack for Sharks never missed a beat in that third quarter, obviously. But he'd be massive loss if he wasn't to line out against Toulouse. I suppose you'd have to edge it to Toulouse given their home record. And, they had a good performance against the Bulls. I thought it was workmanlike. I think the Bulls did, like the Sharks, cause chaos at the breakdown. But Toulouse found a way. They adapted their game plan to really kind of hone in. So I think Toulouse there, that'll be maybe closer here. And I suppose from a Leinster perspective, it's probably better the devil you know. And probably the preference could be Toulouse instead of the Sharks, because the Sharks, that pack, particularly with their attacking maul here, is going to be a massive weapon if they were to face Leinster. I suppose Leicester, where my views are here. I think it's going to be a fast track in the Aviva Stadium. And I think Leicester Tigers will be improved from last season, no doubt. But I think Leinster here, 15-20 points here. I think there's a statement of intent game here, particularly if there's one or two guys coming back in. And if Scott Penny is playing, he'll be eager to impress. So I think Leinster will need to set a statement here, and I think they will. Exeter Stormers, I think Stormers for me probably slight edge, but look, Exeter at Sandy Park here, Liam. Anything's possible here. Now again, I think conditions are set fair at Sandy Park, which might maybe tip the balance here to Stormers, because Exeter did give points away to Montpellier last weekend. And again, if the Stormers can, really set a platform early, I think there's no reason why they can't win by 5 to 7 points. And then La Rochelle Saracens. Saracens were a little bit indifferent against the Ospreys, and credit to Ospreys for the first 50 minutes. Really put it up to Saracens, but Saracens really did finish the game incredibly strong. But if they have that sort of inconsistent performance against La Rochelle, who got their wake-up call against Gloucester, I can see maybe La Rochelle winning by 5 to 8 points. And then the Challenge Cup here, Liam. We have Scarlets, Clermont-Auvergne, Lyon hosting Lyon, Benetton facing Cardiff, and Glasgow Warriors entertaining the Lions. I suppose, what are your tips there for the last 8 here?
Well, for Scarlets against Clermont, I mean, again, Scarlets in the latter half of the season have been the most improved Welsh side, playing some brilliant rugby, and I would very much fancy them to beat Clermont and continue on a really good run in the Challenge Cup. I just think, they're playing heads up rugby, and they're playing the kind of rugby that we always thought they could play, and they're producing it now. So I would be tipping Scarlets by about 10 points. I reckon, against Clermont. Toulon Lyon, it's going to be another cracking game. I would say that Toulon, they still have a pretty good home record, Toulon, and I think that they will come through there in a very tight game, maybe plus 3 points. Glasgow, I think Glasgow will certainly, they will probably have maybe the most comfortable win in the weekend. I know the Lions are incredible at home, but then they can also fall away, and I think that Glasgow will comfortably maybe 15-20 points win against the Lions. And then Benetton and Cardiff again should also be an absolute thriller of a game. Very, very, very sort of open rugby, and I think that Benetton are going to keep going potentially all the way to the final. So I would have to say Benetton by 7 points against Cardiff.
I think I'm pretty much with you on there. The only one probably I disagree with is probably Scarlet's Clermont. And just based on the fact of Clermont-Auvergne's performance against Bristol, at Ashton Gate. They won 33-26. Free-flowing game, as you would expect, between these two. Scarlets got the job done against Brive. Brive have massively struggled this season. Recall the Connacht Rugby where they got hit for an absolute cricket score in the sports ground. And again, I don't think the interest was there really from Brive here either. So, look, I think Scarlets are going to have to pick up their performance twofold on this Clermont-Auvergne side, who I think have spotted that this Challenge Cup may be their way to get into Champions Cup this year, given their domestic form has been very up and down. So I'm going to hesitantly give the bet to Clermont-Auvergne here to win by maybe 2-3 points. I think Toulon-Lyon, I think, is a coin toss here. I think who wants this more? Maybe Toulon, given that they're at home. But I mean, Lyon put 41 points past Stade Francais. And we talk about teams that have struggled once getting out of Champions Cup, Heineken Cup. Stade Francais is one of those teams here, Liam. You know, they've never really recovered after getting out of the Heineken Cup here. A team that back in the 80s, 90s were one of the perennials are really struggling at the moment. I think, to be fair, from a Lyon perspective, they put them to the sword quite easy last weekend. But I think Toulon, I think 3 points. Yeah, Benetton Cardiff is going to be an absolute stonking game because Cardiff come into this game on the back of the 28-27 win over the Sale Sharks. I think there's nothing here to recall it. I think plenty of tries anyway, but I would go for Benetton here. If they continue to play that front foot rugby that we've seen against Connacht Rugby, then I think Cardiff Rugby will be in a bit of bother here. So I'll go Benetton by 5 to 10 points. And then Glasgow Lions, yeah, I think it's a 20-point win all day long here for Glasgow Warriors. They're playing a superb brand of rugby. And for me, I think they're the form. They could be the favourites to actually win this whole competition. All going well. Franco Smith has really gelled the side magnificently well. The performance in Thomond Park 2 weeks ago really was a statement of intent. Putting 73 points against Dragons was another statement of intent. And again, if they can put another performance together here, Liam, I mean, that will really set the cat among the pigeons here in this tournament because they could be scheduled to play the winners of Benetton and Cardiff in the last four, which would be a mouth-watering prospect. So, yeah, Glasgow for me. That's probably the tie of the round here for me for a certain win for Glasgow. Probably because of that for me, saying that. I suppose, Liam, we'll get away from European Cup Rugby here and look at maybe the Tik Tok's Women's Six Nations Championship. I suppose, can we get your reflections first on the first two rounds? I mean, it's probably a table of probably two halves here.
Yeah, well, certainly like in the last day, you know what I mean? I mean, having got a hammer in the very first game to then have to face France, yeah, it was like just going to be brutal. The fact that we've only got like, you know, a try in two games and at basically half century conceded. It's like almost like, where do you go from here, really, isn't it? I mean, the fact that also Ireland were down to 14 after 21 minutes is also pretty disastrous as well. But it's just the fact that in all facets, the team is just a breakdown in terms of scrummaging and in ball handling. It's just kind of all going wrong at the moment. So at least the next game against Italy is a game that certainly is winnable at very least. They have to keep their heads up and they have to find a way to just get over the line in winning, because the other teams they're playing are, to be fair, professionals, better kind of structures, probably better coaching. So it's just a question for Ireland in getting something out of the next three games.
I think it's to identify a core group of players that you can build a long-term project on. Now, I know that there's a Sevens women's team that are on the circuit at the moment. You have like Steve Parsons, you have other players there that would come back into the reckoning. But I think for the management here, I think it's just imperative to identify who can make the cut and who doesn't. And I think being very clinical about that. I think people will be getting an awful lot of opportunities, I would think, from the squad, given the roster and given the scheduling so far. But I suppose you've probably touched upon it here, Liam, in terms of, you know, all facets of play here are well behind those that we've faced so far. I suppose the case study is Wales for Ireland. I mean, you look at 12, 18 months ago, Wales were kind of in a similar spot. Results not going their way, getting heavy losses, and they've kind of seemed to have turned it around, had a good World Cup. They've continued that into that Six Nations with an emphatic win against Ireland and also a good win against Scotland as well. that was a very competitive game. So I think from an Ireland perspective, it really is a case of an awful lot of things having to be worked on in the next few years. I don't see any short-term fix here, Liam. I think in terms of like Nicola Friday, Sam Monaghan, the women that have gone to England, you can see their performance levels are absolutely on point. I think Nicola Friday has been absolutely one of the standouts for Ireland here, leading by example. But again, there has been, that glaring kind of difference in performance across the team here. And I think the more exposure that players get to higher intensity matches, fixtures, the better. And if that means having to go to England, going to France to really hone in their craft, then so be it, because the body of evidence here is suggesting here that the domestic game is a little bit well behind in terms of the other leagues here. Yeah, it's a difficult spot. The players are trying exceedingly hard. But again, you're looking at the stats here, only one try from 160 minutes of rugby. The kick game, I think, has been absolutely very poor. Just in terms of even the French game, again, I'd like to see our 9 maybe trying to kick a little bit more and not put the pressure on the 10 so much. So I think from that perspective, there's so many angles here that need to be kind of rectified, but that can only be rectified by, trusting the squad here. The scrummaging here is another kind of maybe source of concern. It's there's no quick fixes here, unfortunately, for Ireland here, because you look at the roster, you look at France, the development of those players. I mean, they've they're professional, for a few seasons now, but again, they've been a perennial power along with England here in Six Nations. But they won't go down to 14 players after about 15 minutes. But to be honest, their gain line meters it really did counteract any advantage that Ireland would have had with 14 players. It was just the physicality, just in terms of the 9-10, the halfback play that France played at. It was at a different level to Ireland, unfortunately. And I think it's just lessons learned here from Ireland. And again, Nicola Friday came out, fronted up to the cameras. But you can see that they're striving here. But again, this Italian game is going to be a tough game for them away from home. And also the fact that this Italian-England performance, I thought Italy for good parts of that game were well organised and had some good attacking moves, particularly in that first, second quarter. So I think from Ireland, it could be an arduous task here to really kind of get anything from the tournament. But I think it's just building progression, building confidence, or building performance levels on all facets of play here.
Yeah, it is. But I mean, the thing is, it was also the way the men's game when they initially handed out contracts. Most of the other players at the provinces were actually amateur, very much part-time. And here now we have players contracted, so it looks professional, but it's anything but. As you alluded to with the 7 squad, the 7 squads are definitely taking precedence. They're not available for most of the year. They have their own competitions, and they are some of the best rugby players that Ireland actually have, particularly in terms of backline players, right? And then you have a situation where the likes of the Irish props currently are known to scrummage against, really, essentially. I mean, you're paying them to be professional players, but you're not allowing them to be professional. And we have to look maybe in terms of scrapping the whole kind of women's All-Ireland League and having, again, the 4 provinces exclusively. And maybe there might be an equivalent of a European pan-European competition anyway in the next few years, and that certainly is maybe something to look at as well.
Yeah, or you amalgamate teams. I mean, I hate to say that, but if it means elevating performances and elevating fixtures to the next level from a domestic perspective, identifying grassroots, then so be it. I think it's I think the provincial setup, and particularly the IQ based players as well, that's worked to a certain extent here. But again, it's as long as the RFU are continuing to invest in women's rugby. But again, it's that 7-15 conundrum here. Obviously, the objective is clear here that they want the Sevens team to participate in Paris Olympics. You can only do that by performing well on the Sevens circuit. So I think it's just an opportunity here for management really to see where the squad depth is, and really make hard calls on players that they just feel are not going to make the cut. And that's just unfortunate, but I think that needs to happen. And then you can literally then assess in terms of your contracts, players even going to France, even, to really kind of hone in on their skills. It's a difficult one here, Liam. There's no quick fix here. And I think there's kind of case study of the men's game when it kind of started up, the contracts. It did take a few years to really things to settle down, and I think it's the Tuckman model here. We're just in a forming stage from an Ireland rugby, women's professional rugby era. So I think it's just in fairness for the IRFU, the vested stakeholders, to commit to this program. The coaching aspect here in the grassroots, even with the AIL clubs, provincials, to elevate that as well. It just needs the time and it needs the support here. But yeah, look, all the best to the Ireland team anyway. But I suppose looking at the other teams here, I mean, England and France have stood out, but Wales, as I said, has been one of the surprises here. And they're kind of going into this kind of bye week 2 from 2 as well. But England and France really, no surprises here. The perennials are really flexing their muscles here at early doors in the tournament.
Yeah, of course they are. Yeah, I mean, England are just ferocious up front. Their sheer power and size is frightening, to be honest about it. But Wales will come away as being the story of the competition. Like, there's nothing about it. I mean, the likelihood is that they can pick up 3 wins out of 5, which is incredible stuff, really. That will get them certainly probably potentially even up to second in the table. Again, though, the Italians, as you alluded to there, the Italians have also improved, and they might have had the power that England had last time out, but they have the absolute skill levels to really trouble Ireland again. And yeah, the quality has been actually very excellent so far in the Women's Six Nations this year.
There've been an awful lot of standout performers here. I think England have really impressed me since the World Cup, where they used them all particularly as their go-to. They've now started to evolve and expand their game plan. When you see tight head prop in Byrne just literally running like a 13, offloading superbly well, the likes of Dow at fullback scoring 4 tries, they're really creating an awful lot of expansive field position here. And I think England are going to be a dangerous animal. Same with France as well. I think the statement of intent when they went to 14 players against Ireland, I thought it was just a fantastic performance from France, from the 14 players here. Really was just a really superb game. Pauline Bourdon, what can you say here, Liam? Number 9 par excellence. Her link-up play is like Antoine Dupont in the French men's team. They're just she was just incredible down at Musgrave Park. 3 try assists really, and to be fair, they're the 2 key sides here. But take nothing away, I think, from Wales. Wales do play England in Cardiff Arms Park on April 15th, so that'll be a nice barometer for Wales. But they're going in high confidence, so that's maybe the hope here for the Ireland. Scotland ran Wales pretty close in the last round. So hopefully Wales can really put up a good performance against England here to really kind of test England out, because England do have a number of injuries here. I think there's 18, 19 injuries, but such is their strength and depth here, Liam. And this is where Ireland are can only look on and envy here. That this is going to take time to really build squad depth rosters in terms of all the various positions that England have scored 126 points here. With that sort of injuries, and also with the likes of Hunter retiring as well, they haven't skipped a beat. So I think from a Six Nations perspective, it's going to get very exciting here. I think the England-Wales game, definitely. I think it's probably all leading to round 5 here. England-France in Twickenham at 1 p.m. on the 29th of April, realistically, for the Grand Slam and everything else. So, look, it's been an outstanding tournament so far here. And I do admire the tournament organisers here, Liam, as well, for putting on this tournament a little bit later. And I think with the weather conditions being better, it has really promoted more running rugby. And maybe maybe what the men's tournament organisers could maybe do here as well. Maybe to consider maybe shifting this a few weeks similarly to the women's here, because some of the fixtures have really produced some great running rugby. So I don't know. It's I think a very progressive move here from the Women's Six Nation organisers to literally have this literally early spring into summertime. So it's great to see.
Yeah, absolutely. They've picked the perfect time of the year, and look, they should lock it in. Simple as that, and it's going to transform women's rugby even more in terms of the viewing figures and the quality of the rugby, as you said.
Absolutely. No, it's a progressive step, and I know they have the bye week this week. But again, it's going to be very interesting just to see, how the teams develop here. Because for round 3, we do have obviously England, Wales, Italy, Ireland, and also we do have France and Scotland playing as well. So look, I think we'll see a bit more in terms of the body of evidence, in terms of where the gap is in terms of quality between England and France and the rest of the chasing pack next weekend. But I think so far, Wales have been a standout story and a beacon of hope for Ireland, who are really just starting their journey. But I think it's imperative for the RFU to provide the coaching structures, provide the resources here to allow the 15s game to really prosper and develop. Yeah, let's see how it goes. I suppose, Liam, we'll leave it there. It's been a lengthy one, but I think we had plenty to cover tonight. Many thanks for your time. I suppose next week we'll review the Champions and Challenge Cup last 8. We'll be down to the last 4 of those 2 competitions. Obviously, URC is back on tap the following weekend. Again, we've touched upon Munster Rugby's arduous end of season South African trip. So maybe we'll have a review here of the second last regular season weekend. Until then, Liam, thanks very much and have a great weekend.
Thanks, Mark. Enjoy the weekend. Bye.
Thank you for listening to this podcast episode. If you liked what you heard in this podcast, why not subscribe to the Hawkeye Sidekick podcast on either Amazon, Spotify, YouTube or Twitter platforms. You can also follow me at Hawkeye Sidekick on Facebook and Twitter for the latest sporting opinions, articles and reports.